Good afternoon and welcome to the Engineering Talent Awards nominee interviews. This is a series of webinar interviews led by myself and Fayon Dixon in discussion with those who have been nominated at this year's awards. The Engineering Talent Awards are hosted by Equal Engineers. Equal Engineers are an organisation focused on improving the diversity and inclusion of the engineering industry. The awards were, of course, due to take place in April, but with the ongoing coronavirus pandemic are now scheduled to take place in the future. A link to this and all the webinars in the series will be available for sharing once each is complete. In today's webinar, I'm here talking to Oyin Talabi, who is nominated for Engineering Graduate of the Year. Oyin is an energy engineer at Bureau Happold, an international multidisciplinary engineering consultancy. Working with her team, Oyin develops low and zero carbon solutions for new and existing energy systems. Oyin is passionate about diversity within STEM industries and often takes on roles to promote equality and inclusion in the industry. She is chair and co-founder of Bureau Happold's Diversity and Inclusion Network. Welcome, Oyin.
Hello.
How are you?
Good. Can't complain. How are you?
Very well, thank you.
Good.
I like your plant in the background, very nice.
Thank you. It is real.
Yeah, it's important in this day and age of webinars and Zoom chats to have a good background, and I love that.
I know. It's the only white space I also have in the house, so it kind of works out.
Great. Greetings to everyone joining us. Thank you for coming along. So to explain the format quickly, I will put questions to Oyin over the next sort of half hour or so. And there is a Q&A section down the bottom. So if you have any questions, please do submit those and I will ask them towards the end. But if you're ready, I think we'll just jump right in.
I am.
So Oyin, what do you do as an engineer day to day?
Yeah. So as you said, I am an energy engineer at Bureau Happold, which is an engineering consultancy. So a lot of my role is actually developing energy strategies for new or existing development, with the aim to use low to zero carbon technologies on site to reduce the carbon emissions on site as a whole. So I guess generally, if I had a new project, for example, you start off trying to understand what buildings you actually have on site, whether those are offices or residential homes. And then based on that, you would try to understand what the peak demand of the site would be. And once you have that number, then you can then try to translate that into what technologies you would use on site to either provide heat or cooling or power to the site. And then you do a financial model to actually see if there's a financial case for doing it. So that's, I guess, in some ways my overall role. A day in my life will probably look like potentially like a client meeting at the start of it to understand what they actually want, what their aspirations are, or what the targets are. And then a lot of it is spent on Excel. Have a lot of fun on the spreadsheets. Oh yeah. So a lot of calculations on that, and then I may use some software on the day as well. So Energy Pro or NetSim, which would help with sizing some of the different technologies that we would use, or building a hydraulic model for a network, for example.
Amazing. And to clarify, the hydraulic model system, because I asked a question when we spoke before, and I basically imagined a huge bunch of pipes and like a water canister, something you might make in science, maybe in year 8. So it's not that.
Not quite. A lot of it is actually built on a software. It's really pretty when you look at it. Loads of colors and everything
Right.
to understand the like pressure and velocities in the pipes, but nothing as fancy as anything actually built with my hand. Not yet, anyways.
It sounds a lot more fancy, believe me, than what I was imagining. Excuse the sort of the layman's question, but I assume that the requirements are vastly different between the commercial space and a residential space in general.
Yeah, so I think the main difference in terms of my actual work is when that demand comes. So whether that comes during the day or in the evening, and how you then account for that in terms of how you provide the energy. So yeah, your demands are very different. Your users will use it at different times and use different things in the office as than what they would use in their house, for example. So yeah, you have different benchmarks depending on what the typology is.
And I'm assuming as well, sorry for all the questions, but I'm
No.
assuming that varies depending on what the commercial unit is. Because I mean, if I'm
Yeah.
just running a small, cake shop, I probably don't need that much. Although maybe I do. Maybe the ovens, maybe you need more heat. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
So yeah, there's a whole range of things. I mean, generally you would have either benchmarks or meter data, but it would very much depend on what you're actually using it for, whether it's just an office building or if it's a shop or it's a hotel or literally a massive range of things.
it's vastly
um,
varied then.
sorry?
So it's vastly varied, like
Oh
between
yeah,
projects.
yeah,
Wow.
definitely, definitely.
So was this always an industry that interested you?
Yeah, I mean, I've always wanted to be part of the energy industry. So I think how it all started was, so I grew up in Nigeria, and I don't know how much you know about Nigeria, but I used to come here, so the UK or America, a lot for my summer holidays. And one thing I could never understand was how there was always constant electricity here and not so much in Nigeria.
I
So
thought you were going to
things like,
never understand why it was cold and wet all the time.
oh yeah, it's well no, well I mean that also happened, but I also knew that I was always going back home, which was like 30 degrees, so I
Yeah,
didn't really care
that's
about the weather.
fine.
Um, but not knowing if you're gonna have electricity like tomorrow and having to do or plan for things in advance, so it kind of got me thinking. I just couldn't fully understand why that was the case there and not here. So I think that's how I got into kind of just liking energy and electricity as a whole. And at this point, all I knew was, well, oil and gas is the way you kind of produce electricity. So let's get into oil and gas. So then I studied chemical engineering at Loughborough, um, thinking I was going to go into oil and gas after it. And then I changed my mind. I did 1 year in oil and gas, which is absolutely amazing, great experience. But I kind of finished it thinking I want to do something a bit more sustainable and I wanted to be in the renewable energy field. And
Yes.
that's how I got here really.
Wow, and I mean, hopefully that is the future. So, possibly
Yeah.
a career call long term as well.
Yeah.
Although I'm sure it's going to be a while before we can give up on the oil and gas,
Yeah,
sadly.
I think so.
So, a big question next.
Yeah.
Have you ever had to overcome adversity? And if so, can you explain?
Yeah. Where to start from? I think my experience is generally very different from a Black British person that has lived here all their life. And the reason why I say that is, I guess, growing up in Nigeria, the issues are very different from here. And in some ways, everyone looks like you. You have a lot of Black people. So in some ways, you just don't even realize you're Black, if that makes sense. You're just like this human being. But then you move countries and then you realize actually things like your skin color can actually have different um, or could make people speak to you in different ways. And you hear people be like, oh, you speak really good English. And you're like, well, we do speak English in Nigeria too. So it is our first language, uh, which is your typical one. But yes, I moved here just before sixth form. And I guess at the point where I moved as an international student, I felt like I didn't have any experience. So a lot of my friends had done some kind of work experience somewhere,
Yeah.
but I just didn't have that. And because I was, I guess, fresh to the UK, I didn't really know who to speak to actually get this experience. So I did find that in the first 2 years during sixth form, I was, I guess, trying really hard to just speak to any and everyone, emailing like little companies being like, hi, can I get work experience here? And luckily I was able to get a few that way. But it was weird feeling behind, even though I didn't feel that way in my previous school. And then you get into university, and obviously engineering is still very much a male-dominated field. So it's like 10 out of, I don't know, 100 people in your class who are actually female. So there's all of that. And then when you're in a group, you feel like you need to shout more to get
Yeah.
your voice heard a lot. But I think one example that always comes back to me is at the point where I was trying to get internship with this oil refinery. There were five of us on the interview day. I think four guys and me, which is common. I mean, with refineries, you have even less women there. So, and so we had the interview, and that went okay. And at the end of it, there was someone else that was at that interview with me that also went to my university. I was in my year, and he was from Nigeria actually. So he was a black man, and so I got the job, and he was like, "Oh, I heard you got this job," and I was like, "Oh, yeah, yeah." At this point, I didn't know if he had got it as well because I knew they're trying to hire more than one or two people. So he says, "Oh, I didn't get it." I was like, "Oh, okay, well, I'm sure you get something in the future." And he says, "Well, I mean, it kind of makes sense. I mean, one, they're only gonna choose one black person. They're not gonna hire two black people." And I was like, "Okay." And then he says, "Well, and you kind of tick two boxes because you're also female." I was like, "Okay, so let's not talk
Almost
about
like
the fact that
reverse
my
selection is
interview, yeah,
implying, yeah, sort of implying that you got the role basically because you ticked some sort of
yeah, some
box.
boxes." And I
Wow.
think that is the stand, or not standard, but that happens a lot to a lot of women in the field anyway. So it's something that I guess sticks with you all through your career. So even when you go for another job, you're thinking, "Ooh, am I here because of I'm here to like tick a box?" But one thing I think I've realized since then is regardless of how you go into the position, I think what matters is what you do with that position, and what you do to encourage more people that look like you into the field.
I
Yeah.
think that's yeah, I think that's a great takeaway from that because at the end of the day, no one is going to hire people that can't do the job, especially in such a serious role. So,
Yeah.
all you can do is go forward, I guess, and prove that,
Yeah.
shine that light. But yeah, that's almost like double discrimination.
I know.
Coming at me
I
from
know.
every angle. Oh, gosh.
Would have known.
Mm. So, you're currently working on an urban mixed-use development, which contains both residential and commercial space, as we spoke about earlier.
Yeah.
You're designing the heating system, which sounds like a vast task. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so yeah, this is actually, I guess, one project I've worked on throughout my 3 years at Beer Apple now. So it's a mixed use development with about 7,000 flats, so residential homes, about 3 million square feet of commercial space as well, mainly offices, but some retail space and hotels as well. And Beer Happold was appointed to do the heating strategy for the site. So what we've suggested, or well, actually, no, what we're going with is a district heating network. And what that is
Please
I
tell
try
me.
to explain it
Yeah, please tell me.
try not to go into too much detail, but what it is it's a way of heating your buildings on site where you have a centralized energy center. So usually you'd have your normal boiler systems in a building, but with district heating, you would have one building which has all your different technologies. And using a network of pipes, you're able to actually transfer heat from that building to the other buildings on site.
Wow.
So generally, it's a I guess newer technology. It's quite good as well because you're able to make use of the fact that different people will use their heat at different times. So generally, the size of what you actually install in terms of plant is a lot smaller than if you were to install a boiler in every building. So yeah, it's that's generally what district heating is, and that's what we've decided to use for this site. So I guess my main involvement in it has been technical design, so designing up to RIBA 3, and that is just the initial technical design of the pipe. So sizing the pipe, sizing the technology, and this is where you would build a hydraulic model for the site, to understand what
Wonderful.
the pipe sizes are, and then you do a costing exercise to actually see how much it would cost. But then you also have things like Gain and ESCO. So an ESCO is an energy service company, and they'll usually come in to operate and manage the network once you're done installing it. So we were involved with the procurement process of that. So the tendering process of producing the actual documents that went out to tender, and interviewing loads of different companies that wanted to bid for the project. So we've been involved in that, and also just producing things like an employer's requirement for whoever's actually going to come in to install the pipe. So yeah, it's been a, I guess, really, it's a big project, so it's been really good experience for me, especially so early in my career, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds massive, and this complex has hotels in it as well. Is that hotels plural? I mean, that's huge.
So to be honest, I guess it's still in its early stages, so it is changing. At the moment, it has one hotel. I
Mhm.
think it was more than that So at the moment it has one. So we'll see,
In
but it keeps
total,
changing. It's like a
hotels,
30-year build out. So
30.
yeah, so
Wow.
chances are it
God.
will change between now and then.
Because one assumes that, hotels need sort of a relatively constant supply of heat. I guess maybe more at nighttime, obviously, and in the winter. But I mean, they're going to use a lot of energy.
Yeah. So you do need to, yeah, your benchmarks and the numbers you would use for a hotel usually be a lot higher than your offices, for example,
Wow.
because it is kind of all through the day, as you say.
So you graduated in 2017. How
Yeah.
did you find the transition from education to actually doing the job? Did you feel
Um,
well prepared?
well, actually, I think because I had done a few internships before, that definitely helped. I'd obviously then worked in a professional environment before actually coming into this role. So I think that really helped. But because I studied chemical engineering, I don't think that was necessarily your normal route after your degrees done and all of that. So it wasn't the easiest transition, I guess. But having said that, I also think it's not also really been too hard. I think with engineering, you do get loads of skills that are transferable. So I didn't struggle too much. Also, I had really good people in my team who were always keen to answer all my questions. Well, that's what I told myself. So
Absolutely.
it seemed to work.
Cool. I mean, would you recommend internships then to other people who are going into engineering?
Oh yeah, definitely. I think it's a great way to find out if it's actually what you want to do, and if it's the industry you want to stay in. Because without doing a year in oil and gas, I probably wouldn't have known to look for something like renewable energy. So, yeah, 100%. Also, it looks great for your CV when you're applying for jobs. So, I
Yeah,
definitely recommend it.
absolutely. So at Bureau Happold, you co-founded FAIR, which stands for Fairness, Awareness, Inclusion, and Respect. What made you decide to create that?
So so initially I was part of the Young Engineers Forum, which is this group we have at Bureau Happold, which generally you get the young engineers together and it helps with your chartership and different things. So I was on the committee of that group. And I guess in my first year, it was really good to organize these events, but I just thought we were not necessarily having the conversations that I wanted to hear about diversity.
Mm.
And when people did speak about diversity, everyone goes straight to gender. And in
Right.
some ways just focuses on gender. You're like, oh, okay, there's other strands, but yeah, okay,
Yeah,
we're doing.
absolutely.
So someone would say, oh, do you think our partnership is a bit more diverse now? I was like, well, genderly or gender diverse, yeah, you have more women, but not in terms
Compared
of
to
anything else.
1960, yes, it's great. But
Yeah, exactly.
yeah,
So the first thing was we actually organized, so me and someone else in the community, we organized a week, which is we call diversity or cultural diversity week, where we just wanted people to have the conversations about race, religion, and we had breakfast events, we had like a panel debate, and it was really good. But even in these events, you would find people still come and like try to talk about the things they're comfortable talking about, which is generally still gender.
yeah,
And this is how the group in some ways formed, because we wanted a group that you could kind of organize an event, have a safe space to talk about the different strands of diversity, because I just didn't think it was good enough for us to tackle one bit. And it's like, oh, great, we've made progress, but
amazing.
there's still so many other things. So besides to form this diversity and inclusion group in Beer Happold, now initially we're just going to go with diversity and inclusion group.
Catchy.
But what we found was when we said the word diversity, quite a few people didn't engage with it. And they just thought, well, it doesn't really apply to me, especially if you're a white male straight man in engineering. You may think, well, I mean, yeah, doesn't really apply to me. So the whole point, so we decided to use a different name where, well, everyone wants to be fair to people they're working with. Well, I hope everyone wants to be aware about different challenges faced by different diversity groups. Everyone wants to be included and everyone wants to be respected. So with, well, we think everyone should hopefully engage with the word fairness. So we went for Fair London. And yeah, it's been running for almost 2 years now, and it's been really good.
Well, congratulations. I mean, I think that really hits into something quite fundamental. I mean, I think hopefully, as you say, most people want to resonate with the word fairness. You know, we want fairness
Yeah.
for ourselves, and hopefully we want fairness for others. So
Mm,
I think that's quite a key tool you've hit upon there. So congratulations. That's brilliant.
mm,
You've done quite a lot while you're there. So you also run online campaigns such as Share Your Culture.
yeah.
What did that involve?
So we wanted a week where people could just celebrate their cultural differences, whatever that was. So we decided to run. So we have something called Yammer, which is like an internal Facebook page, I guess.
Oh,
And we wanted people to just post on there about things that were unique about their cultures, regardless of what it is. So we started. Well, the first one we ran was last year, actually. So we ran it for a week, actually. Yeah, last year we ran it for a week and it went so well, so we did it again this year and we did it for a month. But people literally just really enjoyed it, posted about different things, things about food, dance, music, days that were important in their culture. I mean, I did one in Nigeria, so I did one in Nigerian weddings,
I was
um,
there.
which was hilarious. So I talked about all the different colors and how bright it was, and the dancing and the food. And I talked about spraying money, which everyone was like, "What is that?"
Spraying money.
So what what it is generally when you dance at these weddings, some people just come out and they, in some ways, just spray money on you. So you have like a stack of, usually,
That
well,
sounds
depending
great.
on how rich you are, you have
Yeah.
like dollar notes and then you just spray it.
I wish I'd known this before I got married. That sounds incredible.
It's great. It really is good. It helped, like sometimes, and it's for everyone as well. So not just the bride and groom. So
Yeah.
everyone can make money.
Nice. So you can go to a wedding and actually come back with a profit.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
It's really good.
Gosh.
Yeah.
Um, so the Bureau Happold Foundation, what is that? And I believe you have a role there, or you've had a role there as well.
Yeah, so it's well, it's the Apple Foundation, which is a charity organization set up by the Partnership of Beer Happold.
Hmm.
And what it is the aim of the foundation is to, one, make sure engineering is for all, so it's inclusive and it is getting more diverse talent into it, but also making sure that engineering actually has a positive impact on people's lives. So there's different strands of the foundation. You have the education and futures strand, which is more about kids and going into schools and speaking to kids that way and trying to inspire them and getting them to actually go into STEM, but also speaking to the different educators as well. So the teachers, and just making sure that they are engaged with what we're doing as engineers, because sometimes what you find is you have a full degree and you realize you actually don't use anything in your degree when you get into
Yeah.
engineering. So just making sure that the modules are still relevant, which has been quite good. Also, you have the thinking strand, which is more about having conversations about the issues we're facing, so like climate change or electric vehicles. And we generally have a panel together who are experts in the field, and we just have a conversation, everyone sharing their different ideas. Usually it's not just Pure Happold, we have partnership with different engineering firms as well. And the last strand is the human development strand, which involves actually going to places and building things like schools or bridges and just sponsoring these projects. So it's yeah, it's a good foundation to be part of, I think. I guess in terms of my role, in some ways, I guess I get involved with the different strands. But one thing we did recently, so every year we have there's a sponsorship program where people could apply for a sponsorship and then you get money towards your education, but also you get a week or 2 weeks of work experience at an engineering firm. So whether that's with us or with one of our partners. And I guess what's different about this particular program is that the what we're aiming to do is attract a diverse diverse group of people into engineering, and we're trying to actually focus on people that have a need. So generally, depending on what your background is, you may not have access to someone that's already in engineering. So you may not, it might be quite difficult for
Yeah.
you to actually get work experience in these places. So when we review the CVs, it's not just about who has the best CV, it's actually about who has a clear need for this, and do they have the experience, and do you think they would actually benefit from this experience more than other people that may already have people in the field or who have already worked with other engineering firms in the past.
That's nice because that really helps sort of level the playing field for those that perhaps just haven't had the access to that.
Yeah,
I really like
yeah.
that. I also like how you discussed about how they go back and sort of, talk to the institutions doing education to make sure that the curriculums are still relevant, because
Mm.
of course industry moves at pace, especially things like engineering. And
Yeah,
if you're teaching things that are a decade out of date, then that learning curve when you do get into the real world is going to be
yeah,
a wall.
definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good foundation to be a part of, definitely.
At this point, I'd remind anybody watching that might want to submit a question to the Q&A to please do it down here. I love doing the pointy finger. That makes me very happy. So this sounds exciting. You presented at the 2019 District Heating Divas Conference. It was their first conference, and you presented on the challenges faced by ethnic minorities. What were some of the key things that you discussed?
So I guess district heating as a whole is it's, although it's still quite new, and I guess it's small group of people actually working in it, what you find is, one, you still have a lot more men than women. So that's generally, and I think that's how the group actually came about. It was trying to connect the different women in district heating. But also you find that you have a lot less people from a different ethnic minority background in district heating. So I think based on this may be like 2 years old now, but generally about 12% of UK engineers are female, and about 8% of that 12% are from a BAME background. So that's in some ways less than 1% of the total engineering population in the UK
Gosh,
are BAME females. So there's clearly there's clearly
that's quite a shocking statistic.
yeah, it is. I mean, and when I found it out, I thought, okay, well, I can see. I mean, you go to your meetings and you kind of see it. So it's, I guess
Yeah.
I wasn't too shocked by it.
Yeah.
But there must be something wrong. I mean, there must be some kind of barrier into getting in, or when you actually do get in, you don't stay in the field. So I talked about different challenges like the stereotype. So do you see an engineer and think, well, actually that person could be a black female, for example, or do you picture someone else? And does that then affect you when you're recruiting? So who you see across the table, and using things like your unconscious bias without realizing that you're actually trying to see yourself in this person, could easily mean that you're missing out on some great talent. Um, Also, those things about people saying, well, I'm color blind, or not. Well, I don't see color, actually, I think is the phrase, which clearly doesn't really help the people of a minority background, because it means that you're not actually acknowledging the different challenges they may face.
Yeah.
Also, depending on what your background is, you may not have access to work experience opportunities, as we already discussed. And if you are looking at a CV, chances are you would want someone that has this experience already. So there are different challenges I think you face, but I mean, I do think there has been some progress in the field. I think seeing things like having more females in leadership positions, that's really positive. But having said that, I do think as engineering and engineering professionals, we tend to focus on the gender bit of things, and
Yes.
we don't necessarily try and push the other strands of diversity. So like things like having a disability, like how many engineering companies actually employ people with a visible disability, and like with hidden disability, are they comfortable enough to even talk to you about it, or do they act like it doesn't exist? So it's in some ways being aware of the different challenges and trying to actually provide training for people to know how, or to for people to know how to interact with people, to make the environment a bit more inclusive for all, but also in terms of recruitment, having things like blind CVs, for example, where you'd actually see the person's name, because chances are if you did see my name, which I mean, you do see Oyin, so you're thinking that's short, but my full name is actually Oyin Consola, and you may see that and you may think, oh, I can't pronounce this, so I have 1,000 CVs to kind of look at. Well, this one's just gonna go because I
Oh,
don't
I
want the
mean, we hope
awkward time
not,
where I
but
try to like, well, yeah,
yeah,
but
but
it's
you have
just
to keep it
knowing not
up.
to do those things. So yeah, I think there are ways to actually make improvements, but we're just being really slow. The other thing is offering work experience to people um, who you may not necessarily offer it to. So you go into the same universities every time and advertising to your Oxford or your Cambridge,
Same
um,
demographic.
or are you exactly you going out to different universities as well? So yeah, it was a good conference, I think.
Sounds amazing. That ties in with what you said before as well about, getting access for work experience to people who just might not find it as easily.
Yeah,
And that's a question I have because I often ask people about their education, the different struggles they faced, but they usually grew up in the UK. So what was engineering on your radar when you were being educated in Nigeria? Was it an option for girls, or because certainly over here it seems that more recently there has been more of a push towards STEM education and possibly the suggestion of STEM careers for women, which of course is great.
mm,
But I think it's depending on who you speak to, but it can be slow, certainly,
yeah.
and by no means even across the playing field. Was it a career that was sort of suggested to you when you were younger?
Not particularly, to be honest. In Nigeria, I would say it's probably even worse in terms of you were generally pushed to do the female-friendly professions. And I mean, I did grow up, or yeah, I did grow up thinking, oh, I wanted to be a doctor. And I wouldn't, I mean, maybe part of that was from me, but I think a lot of it also did come from the influences around me and people being like, well, I think you'll be a great doctor. And wouldn't it be nice to have a doctor in the family?
Mm,
Um, but I
I think every
quickly
family says
realized that I'm not really good with hospitals, like even until now. I just cannot go into a
that.
hospital. Well, not until I need to, anyways. And so at the point where I actually thought, oh, I wanted to be an engineer, I did get a lot of negative comments like, well, that's a man's job. Why are you trying to get in there? Why don't you do something a bit more female friendly? And since it's going to be really difficult, why are you going through all that stress? And yeah, I mean, luckily I was able to kind of ignore that and still do what I wanted. But a lot of people hear that and think, well, actually, maybe I'll just do something else. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, I said that I was going to leave all Q&A submissions until after I'd asked the questions I'd already sort of planned. However, we've had a question come in which fits in perfectly well with what we were just speaking about. So I think I'll just go ahead and ask this. So we've been asked, you are clearly a fantastic advocate for inclusion and diversity, which you manage to do in addition to your day job. What do you think people in leadership roles should be doing in this space? I think it's a brilliant question.
Um, One, I think there should be a bit more training. I think our leadership positions are still not diverse, and the people that occupy those positions are not diverse enough. And sometimes it is really hard to fight a fight that's not yours. So I think once get the training required for the people in this position so they're aware of the things like their unconscious bias, but also try to diversify your leadership positions because once you have a more diverse field, chances are you would have more people being employed as well. Because when I do look at a company, generally I want to see people that look like me. I want to see people that could be my role models, people that I could speak to that will understand the same struggles I've been through because they're like, oh yeah, actually I had that as well. And not a lot of companies currently have that. Also, certain things are like targets and actively actually doing. So a lot of companies say, well, we care about inclusion and diversity, but they just say it and do
Yeah,
absolutely
just
nothing
put it on
about
the
it.
website.
But in some ways, putting your money where your mouth is in a sense. So, what are you doing? What targets do you have? Do you have a goal you're trying to achieve? And why do you even want it? Like, why do you want an inclusive environment? Why do you want a diverse environment? Answering those questions and then certain actual actions after that, I think, is what leaders need to be doing and talking about it.
No, that's a brilliantly succinct answer, and I think you're absolutely right. I mean, the question of why, I think there's so much. They put what is the expression? I'm awful with expressions. The bull before the cart, or the horse before the cart, or the cart before the horse. Whichever way, they get it the wrong way round. So they think they should be doing it, but they haven't stopped to ask why.
Yeah.
of course, the vast benefits that it would probably bring to their workforce. But well, that was a brilliant question. So thank you to Mary for that. That was a great question. So just skipping back to my questions. I know that Bureau Happold have worked on quite exciting projects like the Millennium Dome. Have you worked on anything massively exciting so far? Or I guess probably the one you're working on is probably the most exciting because it sounds huge.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the one project that I think I've worked on for a long time, so it's probably my main one. But yeah, I mean, we have all these exciting projects. I'm not a civil engineer, so sometimes it's really hard for me to get excited about structures. But having said that, you do get to these places that Beer Happold have worked on, and I'm like, oh, actually, I'll have you know that Beer Happold did the design of this building. At this point, I clearly hadn't worked with Beer Happold, but it is it's exciting to see these projects, and I definitely want to be a part of it. I have worked on projects that are like new cities, which has been fun, but can't talk too much about it. So, yeah.
No, I totally understand that. You've got to be discreet. In your role, you work a lot on sustainability and low carbon solutions, which is fantastic. I think something that many people are very passionate about. Hopefully, and hopefully, once we come out of the situation we're in at the moment, that will only increase. Was that something? I mean, you've sort of already touched on the fact that that was something that was important to you to work on. But was that a key attraction to the role you're currently in?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it was the reason why I guess I went from oil
Wow.
and gas into what I'm currently doing. And I think we all need to play our part and try to have an impact on people's lives and just our society as a whole and our community. So, yeah, I do like that my job actually has an impact on people's lives.
Yeah, and I know you're working from home like most people. How are you finding that? Do you think that is possibly the future? I mean, could your role be done from home?
I think so. I mean, you can replace working from home with like the personal contact and project meetings where you actually want to see people and show your drawings and talk with like your paper run and all of that. But I do think the future is working flexibly. So actually working in a way that works for you as opposed to just going to the office for the sake of going to the office and having your 9 to 5. I think this period has shown that we can do it, so I don't see why we should go back to the traditional ways.
No, absolutely. I mean, if one of the few good things to come out of this might be, more of an understanding and a change to working practices, which hopefully will lower our carbon footprint with less people driving to work and all
Definitely.
of that. Hopefully.
Hopefully.
One can only hope. So one more question from me, and then we've had one more question come in as well, which is great. So I was just going to ask, what the future looks like for you personally, your aspirations, and also for FAIR, things, taking it forward.
Yep. For me, I reckon I probably would be in the energy field for a while. I'm hoping to get chartered as well, so I think that's my
Wow.
next step. Not sure when that's going to happen yet, but hopefully quite soon. In terms of FAIR, so we started FAIR London, or well, we started FAIR in the London office, which is called FAIR London. And that's gone really well. We've had a lot of engagement, and we decided to try and roll this out to the different UK offices as
Amazing.
well. So we have 5 UK offices. And so now we've actually set up hubs in Bath and Leeds, and we're hoping to do the same in Manchester and Edinburgh this year as well. So it's good seeing it grow. So going forward, I guess what I would be focusing on would be more rolling it out to the UK and potentially actually just having workshops in the different offices as well. Because I think depending on where you are, the different challenges will be, or the challenges will be different
Yeah,
in
of
the
course.
different offices. So yeah,
Well, fantastic. I mean, that sounds brilliant. It's great that it's something that is so tangible. You can take it forward to all the other offices.
yeah.
More people should do that. So then we have a question, which I will make my last unless any more come in. And this is from Lara. She says, how do you think engineers can do better at engaging with BAME communities in the delivery of projects? Would you see there being any particular barriers or opportunities, especially with delivering a just low carbon transition? Sorry, the text was tiny. Reading like an idiot.
That's an interesting one because I guess in some ways your clients and depending on your clients and your developers generally you don't have a lot of BAME people in the field. So when you then design to your client's aspiration, which isn't necessarily from um, the communities that they're actually trying to change, for example. So to start with, I think more workshops should be run with the people that actually live in the communities. So we shouldn't just be designing in some ways a textbook way where it's like, okay, this is what we do, and not really trying to think about people that would be using it and people that are currently already used to their current community.
Yeah.
So engaging with the actual community a bit more, but also I think the way to actually get more BAME people into designing jobs or engineering jobs or developing jobs would be just offering the experience to actually come into the industry to see what you're doing. So whether that's actually just getting someone to shadow you for a period of time or offering work experience to them, because it's really hard for you to go into something that you don't know.
Yeah.
Especially when you have the financial companies who are like, "Oh, join us! You can make loads of money," and
Giving
it's
it away.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
absolutely.
So it's encouraging people to join that way. So engaging with the communities, but also not being afraid to have the difficult conversations, because some people would just avoid it just because it's uncomfortable. But
Yeah.
you just don't really make any progress if you do that.
No, absolutely. Unfortunately, you have to lift the lid and have these conversations, even if they are hard.
Yeah,
That sounds great. And again, it's so much of what you said, comes back to, good access to things like, work experience and, placements and shadowing. I mean, I think there's a really strong message in there somewhere.
yeah.
Well, I think that's us done. So thank you for watching, and please do remember to share the link from this webinar. Until next time, it's goodbye, and we look forward to finally being able to celebrate the Engineering Talent Awards later this year. Thank you, Oyin, and thank you to everyone who watched.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.